In the small hut at the edge of the village, ADANNA's hands trembled as she adjusted the heavy bridal jewelry forced upon her. Each golden bangle felt like a shackle. Each embroidered fold of her wrapper, a cage. Outside, the villagers gathered, their laughter and drumbeats deafening. They were celebrating. Celebrating what they believed was fortune smiling upon her. They did not know the truth. They did not know that behind the grand feast, behind the smiles exchanged over palm wine, a bargain had been struck, a deal made without her voice, without her consent. And now, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, marking the end of the life she had known, a question burned in the air like the last embers of a dying fire. Would she surrender to the fate they had written for her? Or would she rewrite the story before it was too late? ADANNA sat on the wooden stool in the corner of her family's modest hut. The scent of burning firewood mixed with the fresh evening breeze as her stepmother's laughter echoed from the front yard, where she was sharing stories with her favorite child, Kizoba. ADANNA, on the other hand, had always been treated like an outsider in her own home. Her father, Obinna, a once wealthy trader who had lost everything to bad business deals, barely acknowledged her existence. Instead, all of his attention and remaining resources were dedicated to Kizoba, the daughter of his second wife, Masoma. ADANNA's real mother had died giving birth to her, a fact that was thrown in her face at every opportunity. She had grown up being blamed for a death she had no control over, being reminded that her life was nothing but a stain on her father's once happy marriage. If only it had been you instead of your mother, Obinna had once said, his words slicing through her like a blade. She had learned to live with the resentment, had learned to keep her head down and walk tirelessly in the fields, knowing that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be enough in her father's eyes. That evening, as she finished preparing the evening meal, Masoma's sharp voice rang through the hut. "ADANNA, come here at once." ADANNA wiped her hands on her worn-out wrapper and walked towards the main room, where her father and stepmother sat with a visitor, an older man dressed in expensive traditional robes. The moment she saw him, a sinking feeling settled in her stomach. Something was wrong. "ADANNA," Obinna began, his tone firm. "You have been chosen." She frowned. "Chosen for what, Papa?" "For marriage," Masoma said with a smirk, as if she had just announced the greatest news of ADANNA's life. "You should be grateful. Not everyone gets such an opportunity." ADANNA's heart slammed against her ribs. "Marriage?" Her voice wavered as she turned to the man sitting before them. He was old, easily in his 60s, with a large, protruding belly and thick gold rings on his fingers. His name was Chief UCHE, a wealthy landowner who had buried 3 wives before seeking a 4th. "Yes, girl," Chief UCHE said, his voice deep and authoritative. "You should be honored. Your father has agreed to the union." ADANNA's breath caught in her throat. She turned back to Obinna. "Papa, no. I don't want to." Obinna slammed his fist against the wooden table. "This is not up for debate, ADANNA. Chief UCHE has been generous enough to offer a great bride price. Do you think you have any better prospects? You should be thanking him." ADANNA's knees felt weak. This was it, her entire future being decided for her without a single consideration for her wishes. "But Papa, I want to go to school." "I want to." Masoma let out a cruel laugh. "School? What nonsense. Girls like you are meant for marriage, not education. You should be counting yourself lucky." ADANNA felt her world crumbling around her. She turned to Kizoba, who sat smirking beside her mother, enjoying every second of ADANNA's misery. There would be no one to save her. No one to fight for her. The wedding was set to take place in 1 week. Hi besties. I am so grateful for your support to Folktales by AJ. Where are you watching from? Let's dive in, but don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. As the days passed, ADANNA tried everything to resist, but her father's decision was final. She was forbidden from leaving the house without supervision, and every attempt to plead with him was met with harsh words and even harsher consequences. The night before the wedding, she sat in her small sleeping space, staring at the moon through the tiny window. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Mama, what do I do?" The next day, she was dressed in an elaborate traditional bridal attire, the heavy gold jewelry weighing down on her like chains of imprisonment. As the drums of celebration echoed through the village, she was led towards the chief's grand compound, her heart pounding with every step. The entire village had gathered, the women ululating, the men laughing and drinking palm wine. No one cared that she was walking towards a life she didn't want. The marriage rites were completed before the sun had even set. Chief UCHE grinned with satisfaction as he took her hand and led her inside his mansion. ADANNA barely registered what was happening as she was ushered into the grand bedroom, her feet sinking into the expensive Persian rug. Her hands trembled as she stood in the center of the room, her breath shallow. She had heard stories, horrible stories, of what happened to young brides in forced marriages. As Chief UCHE closed the door behind them, she braced herself for the worst. But then, something unexpected happened. Chief UCHE sighed and sank into the large armchair, rubbing his temples. "Sit down, girl." ADANNA hesitated before perching on the edge of a chair across from him. He studied her for a long moment before shaking his head. "I don't expect you to understand this now, but you are not the one I wanted to marry." She blinked in confusion. "What?" He let out a tired chuckle. "Your father was desperate for money. I only agreed to this marriage because he was willing to offer you at a low bride price." ADANNA's blood ran cold. "So, you don't?" He waved a hand dismissively. "I have no interest in forcing myself on a girl who clearly does not want to be here. I am too old and too tired for such foolishness." He leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "But tell me, girl, what is it that you truly want?" ADANNA's mind raced. No one had ever asked her that before. No one had ever cared. But as she sat there, staring at the man she had feared, she realized something. Maybe, just maybe, this was not the end of her story. Maybe this was just the beginning. And just like that, the night that was supposed to seal her fate changed everything. ADANNA sat motionless in the massive bedroom, her mind racing as she tried to process Chief UCHE's unexpected words. The terror she had braced herself for had not come. Instead, she found herself staring at a man who, despite his wealth and power, looked exhausted, tired not just from age but from something deeper, something unseen. For a moment, she considered whether this was some kind of trick, a test before the real nightmare began. But Chief UCHE made no move toward her. Instead, he poured himself a glass of palm wine and stared at the flickering lantern, lost in thought. "You still have not answered my question, girl," he said after a long silence. "What do you want?" ADANNA hesitated. No one had ever asked her that before, not her father, not Masoma, not anyone. For so long, her future had been dictated by others, her voice swallowed by the expectations of a society that saw her as nothing more than a commodity. What did she want? Freedom. Revenge. A life beyond the narrow existence she had always known. She finally found her voice. "I want to be free." Chief UCHE chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "Freedom is a strange thing, my dear. Some think they have it, yet they are the most enslaved. Others believe they are imprisoned, yet they hold more power than they realize." He set his drink down and studied her carefully. "You are young. You still believe freedom is a thing that can be granted. But true freedom, that is something you take." ADANNA swallowed hard. "Are you saying I should run away?" The old man's lips curled into a knowing smile. "And where would you go? Back to your father, who sold you like livestock?" Back to a village that celebrates your misery? No, child. Running is not the answer. She frowned. Then what is? Chief UCHE leaned forward. Knowledge. Power. If you wish to change your fate, you must first understand the world you live in. And for that, you must open your eyes to things you have never seen before. ADANNA had no idea what he meant, but she was too exhausted to question him further. That night, for the first time in days, she allowed herself to sleep without fear. The next morning, she was awakened not by the harsh commands of her stepmother but by the gentle voice of an elderly maid named Ijoma. "Come, my daughter," the woman said, setting down a tray of food. "The chief has asked for you." ADANNA sat up, confused. "Asked for me?" Ijoma smiled warmly. "He is waiting in the study." ADANNA dressed quickly, her mind spinning with uncertainty. Why had Chief UCHE spared her? Why had he not treated her like the other wives before her? And what exactly did he mean by knowledge and power? She found him seated in an expansive study, surrounded by walls lined with books, more books than she had ever seen in her life. There were scrolls, ledgers, and thick-bound volumes with titles she could not even pronounce. He gestured for her to sit. "I want you to learn," he said simply. "Starting today, you will spend time in this study. You will read, you will write, and you will think. The world does not belong to the strongest, ADANNA. It belongs to those who understand it." She stared at him, bewildered. "You want me to study?" "Yes." His expression darkened slightly. "And I want you to listen. There are things happening in this village, in this land, that you do not yet understand. If you are to survive, you must know more than what they have told you." Over the next few weeks, ADANNA found herself drawn into a world she had never imagined. Each day, she sat in the study, absorbing knowledge that had once been forbidden to her. She read about history, about trade, about the power dynamics between villages and chieftaincies. She learned about the corruption that ran deep within their society, the silent wars fought not with weapons, but with gold and influence. But the most shocking revelation came one evening when she overheard a hushed conversation between Chief UCHE and one of his trusted advisors. She had been walking past the study when she heard her father's name mentioned. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pressed herself against the wooden door, straining to hear. "Obinna is desperate," the advisor was saying. "He thought selling his daughter would clear his debts, but he owes more than he can repay." Chief UCHE exhaled sharply. "I knew he was a fool, but I did not realize he was this reckless." The advisor hesitated. "There is more. He has been making secret deals with outsiders, men who do not respect our traditions. They seek to claim the lands of our people, and Obinna is willing to betray his own for a few coins." ADANNA's blood ran cold. Her father, despite all his cruelty, had always claimed to be a man of honor. But now, he was willing to sell not just his daughter, but his entire people. She felt her stomach churn as realization set in. This was bigger than her first marriage. This was bigger than her own suffering. Her father was playing a dangerous game, one that could destroy everything. The next morning, she confronted Chief UCHE. "You knew my father was a traitor, didn't you?" she demanded. The old man regarded her carefully. "I suspected. But now, we know for certain." ADANNA's hands clenched into fists. "Then why did you marry me? If you despise him so much, why accept his deal?" Chief UCHE chuckled. "Because, my dear, sometimes the best way to destroy an enemy is not through battle, but through patience. Your father believes he has won. But he does not realize that by placing you in my household, he has given me the very weapon that will undo him." ADANNA's breath caught. "Weapon? You, child?" His eyes gleamed. "You will be the one to bring him to his knees." For the first time in her life, ADANNA felt something she had never experienced before, not fear, not despair, but power. The fate that had once been forced upon her was now in her hands. And she would decide how this story ended. ADANNA sat in the grand study, her fingers brushing over the ancient scrolls before her. The words inscribed in careful strokes told stories of great leaders, kings and queens who had risen from nothing to shape the destiny of their people. She had never imagined herself as anything more than a forgotten daughter, discarded by her father and sold like cattle. But now, as she absorbed the knowledge placed before her, she realized that she had been given something far more valuable than gold or marriage, the power of understanding. Chief UCHE's words echoed in her mind. You will be the one to bring him to his knees. For weeks, she trained, not in combat, but in wisdom. She learned the delicate art of negotiation, the hidden language of power that governed the world far beyond her village. She understood that war was not always fought with swords. Sometimes, the sharpest blade was the ability to control the flow of information. One afternoon, as she practiced writing on a wooden slate, Chief UCHE entered the study. He walked with the heavy steps of a man who had seen too much in his lifetime, his once proud stature slightly bent with age. Yet, his mind remained sharp. You have learned much, ADANNA, he said, setting a small wooden box before her. But the time for books is coming to an end. It is time for action. ADANNA hesitated before lifting the lid of the box. Inside, nestled within soft fabric, was a small pendant, carved from ivory and etched with markings she did not recognize. She traced her fingers over it, feeling the weight of its significance. What is this? She asked. A symbol of allegiance, Chief UCHE replied. Your father has been making deals with men who seek to exploit our people. But power is a game of balance, and where there is betrayal, there is also loyalty. That pendant belongs to a group of traders who have long opposed your father's dealings. If you can gain their trust, they may help us expose him. ADANNA swallowed hard. You want me to go to them? Chief UCHE nodded. I want you to listen. To observe. And when the time is right, I want you to strike. The journey to the neighboring village was long, the narrow forest path winding through dense vegetation. ADANNA rode on horseback beside one of Chief UCHE's trusted men, a warrior named Ikin. He was tall and quiet, his presence both intimidating and reassuring. Do you fear what awaits us? Ikin asked as they rode under the shade of towering baobab trees. ADANNA considered his question. Fear had been her companion for so long that she no longer knew how to distinguish it from caution. I fear failure, she admitted. I fear that I will not be strong enough. Ikin gave a small smile. Strength is not in never falling, but in rising each time you do. When they arrived at the marketplace of the neighboring village, ADANNA was struck by its vibrancy. Merchants battered loudly, children weaved between stalls carrying baskets of fruit, and the scent of spices hung in the air like a promise of adventure. She clutched the pendant tightly in her palm as she approached the trading guild's headquarters, a large hut adorned with symbols of wealth and prosperity. The guards at the entrance eyed her suspiciously but said nothing as she stepped inside. A man sat at the center of the room, surrounded by ledgers and maps. He was younger than she expected, his sharp eyes studying her as if peeling back the layers of her soul. You carry something that does not belong to you, he said, his voice measured. ADANNA held up the pendant. It was given to me by Chief UCHE. The man's expression remained unreadable. And why would he send you? Because I am the key to stopping Obina. A flicker of interest crossed the trader's face. Go on. ADANNA took a deep breath. My father has been making deals that endanger not just our village, but all those who rely on fair trade. He sells land that does not belong to him, takes from the people without giving in return. He believes himself untouchable. But he has one weakness. The trader leaned forward. And what is that? ADANNA met his gaze with unwavering resolve. He does not see me. He does not know that I have learned his secrets. And he does not realize that I am the one who will destroy him. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, the trader smiled. Then let us begin. Plan took weeks to put into motion. ADANNA traveled between villages, gathering information, forming alliances with those who had suffered under her father's greed. She learned to navigate the delicate web of politics, to use her father's arrogance against him. Through forged agreements and strategic whispers, she ensured that the elders of their land would hear of Obina's dealings. She planted seeds of doubt, exposed the false promises he had made. And when the time was right, she returned home, not as the helpless girl who had once been sold, but as the storm that would bring justice. The village square was crowded when she arrived, the people murmuring as Obina stood before the elders, his voice filled with confidence as he defended himself. I have done nothing but secure a future for my people, he declared. Those who accuse me do so out of jealousy. ADANNA stepped forward. And what of the lands you have stolen? What of the people who have suffered? Obina turned sharply, his face twisting in shock. You. She lifted a bundle of documents, evidence of his betrayals. Your secrets are no longer hidden, father. The people see you now for what you are. Gasps echoed through the crowd as the elders took the documents, their faces darkening with realization. Obina's protest grew frantic, his confidence unraveling before their eyes. By the time the judgment was passed, he was no longer the man he had once been. The village turned its back on him, and for the first time in his life, he knew what it meant to be powerless. As the crowd dispersed, Chief UCHE approached ADANNA, pride in his eyes. You have done what many could not, he said. You have changed the course of history. ADANNA looked out at the village, the place that had once been her prison. And for the first time, she felt truly free. The battle had been won. But her journey was only beginning. The village buzzed with whispers in the days following ADANNA's return. The once unshakable reputation of her father, Obina, now crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence. The elders had gathered multiple times to deliberate over his crimes, and each day, more villagers came forward with stories of deceit, land theft, and broken promises. The people, who had once bowed to his influence, now spoke of him with anger and betrayal. But despite everything, ADANNA knew that Obina was not a man who would go down quietly. He had spent his life manipulating and controlling those around him, and if she had learned anything from her time in Chief UCHE's house, it was that men like him never surrendered without a fight. She sat under the shade of a large mango tree near the village square, listening as traders and farmers exchanged worried glances. The elders have still not reached a final decision, one man muttered. Obina is pleading for mercy, claiming he only did what was best for us. Best for us? Another scoffed. While his own pockets grew fat with stolen wealth. He must think we are blind. ADANNA clenched her fist. She had done everything in her power to expose her father's corruption, but the final step would not be hers to take. That responsibility lay with the elders, the true keepers of justice in the village. And yet, doubt crept into her mind. Could they be bribed? Could her father's influence still be strong enough to twist the truth in his favor? A familiar voice pulled her from her thoughts. You look troubled. She turned to see Ikin, Chief UCHE's trusted warrior, standing beside her. He had remained close since their journey together, a quiet presence in the background of her mission. She had learned to trust him in ways she had never trusted anyone before. I fear that justice may slip through our fingers, she admitted. My father will not accept defeat easily. He will find a way to turn this in his favor. Ikin studied her for a moment before speaking. Then perhaps you must give the people a final push. ADANNA frowned. What do you mean? He glanced around before leaning in slightly. A man's downfall is not complete until he has lost the faith of those who once followed him. Your father may have lost his power among the elders, but some still hesitate. If you want to ensure his fall, you must remind the people why they can never trust him again. ADANNA understood. The final step in destroying her father's influence was not in the hands of the elders, it was in the hands of the people. That evening, under the full moon's glow, ADANNA stood before the village, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. For years, we have lived under the illusion that leadership meant unquestioned power, she began. We believed that one man could decide our fate, that his word was law even when it was unjust. But what happens when that man does not serve the people? What happens when he serves only himself? Murmurs spread through the gathered crowd. Faces filled with contemplation, with realization. ADANNA continued, her voice gaining strength. My father, your leader, has taken from you. He has sold our lands, deceived our elders, and betrayed the very people he swore to protect. But even now, he hopes you will forgive him. Even now, he believes that his wealth and power are enough to erase his crimes. Tell me, my people, will you let him? A resounding no echoed through the square. One of the elders, a man named Namdi, stepped forward. Obina's fate will be decided at dawn. The people will bear witness to justice. And just like that, the final blow was struck. Obina was brought before the elders the next morning. His once proud posture had faltered, his fine robes replaced with the simple cloth of an accused man. Yet his eyes still burned with defiance as he faced those he had once ruled over. I have served this village all my life, he declared. Everything I have done was to secure our future. If I have taken, it was only to give back tenfold. One of the elders shook his head. You have taken and taken, Obina, but you have given only to yourself. The people have spoken. Obina's lips pressed together tightly. And what is my punishment? His voice was edged with challenge, as if daring them to exile him, to remove him in a way that he could still return from. Elder Namdi's expression was solemn. You will be stripped of your titles. Your wealth will be redistributed to the people you have wronged. And you will be banished from this land. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Exile was the worst fate a man like Obina could face. It was not just the loss of his power, it was the loss of everything. No home. No legacy. No name to pass down. Obina's face twisted in rage, then disbelief, then finally, resignation. He turned his gaze to ADANNA, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that had never been there before, recognition. He knew this was her doing. That the daughter he had once dismissed as insignificant had been the one to orchestrate his ruin. But ADANNA felt no satisfaction in his defeat. She did not celebrate as the villagers cheered. She simply watched as the guards led him away, his figure disappearing into the horizon. A heavy hand rested on her shoulder. Chief UCHE stood beside her, nodding in approval. It is done. ADANNA exhaled slowly. It is only the beginning. The village would heal. The people would rebuild. And she, for the first time in her life, was free to decide her own path. The tyrant had fallen. But her story was just beginning. The village stirred with an energy ADANNA had never seen before. The shadow of her father's tyranny had lifted, leaving behind a community that was eager to reclaim its honor and rebuild what had been lost. With Obina gone, the elders had begun restructuring leadership, ensuring that no man could ever wield unchecked power again. But amidst the change, one question remained: what would become of ADANNA? She had spent her entire life fighting against the fate others had imposed upon her. First, she had fought against being seen as an unwanted child. Then, she had fought against a forced marriage, only to discover a greater battle, the battle to reclaim the dignity of an entire people. But now that the fight was over, she found herself standing at the edge of an unknown path. What was she meant to do now? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues of orange and purple, Chief UCHE summoned her to his compound. She found him seated in his study, the place where her transformation had begun. He gestured for her to sit across from him, his expression unreadable. "You have done what many thought impossible," he said. "Your father is gone. The village is free. And yet, I sense that you are unsettled." ADANNA hesitated before speaking. "I spent so long fighting to take control of my life. Now that I have it, I do not know what to do with it." Chief UCHE nodded slowly. "That is the burden of those who survive great battles. But you must understand, your journey is not over. The world is vast, and power comes in many forms. You have already proven that you can change the course of history. The question is, how will you use that power now?" ADANNA frowned. "I do not know." Chief UCHE leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "Then it is time for you to learn." The days that followed were unlike any ADANNA had ever known. Chief UCHE took her under his wing, not just as a student but as a potential leader. She sat in on village meetings, listened to the discussions of trade agreements, and even traveled to neighboring communities to witness how different leaders govern their people. She learned that leadership was not about titles or wealth but about service. A true leader did not demand loyalty, they earned it through wisdom and action. Ikin, who had been a silent guardian throughout her journey, began to train her in matters beyond strategy. "You must learn to defend yourself," he told her one morning as he handed her a wooden staff. "Power attracts both allies and enemies. You must be ready for both." At first, ADANNA struggled. She was used to battles fought with words, not weapons. But Ikin was patient, guiding her movements, teaching her how to anticipate an opponent's attack before they even made it. In time, she grew stronger, not just in body but in mind. She understood now that power was a delicate balance between knowledge and action. To lead, she had to be both wise and capable of protecting what she built. As months passed, the village flourished. Without Obina's corruption draining their resources, trade flourished, and new alliances were formed with neighboring communities. The people no longer lived in fear but in hope. And yet, despite all the progress, whispers began to spread, whispers of uncertainty about who would take permanent leadership of the village. The elders, despite their wisdom, were old. They knew that a new generation needed to step forward. And to ADANNA's surprise, her name was on the lips of many. One evening, as she walked through the village, a young girl ran up to her. "ADANNA," she said breathlessly, "the elders wish to see you." Curious, ADANNA followed the girl to the village square, where a large gathering had formed. The elders stood at the center, their expressions solemn yet expectant. Elder Namdi, the eldest among them, stepped forward. "ADANNA, daughter of this land," he began, his voice steady, "you have proven yourself to be more than what the world once believed of you. You have shown courage, wisdom, and a heart that beats for the people. Our village stands at the dawn of a new era, and we need a leader who understands both the pain of the past and the possibilities of the future." ADANNA's heart pounded as realization dawned upon her. "We ask you to lead us," Elder Namdi continued. "Not as a ruler, but as a guide. Will you accept?" A hush fell over the crowd. ADANNA looked around at the faces of her people, the same people who had once seen her as nothing more than a discarded daughter. But now, they saw her for what she had become. Not a victim. Not a pawn. But a force of change. She took a deep breath before speaking. "If you will have me," she said, "I will serve." A thunderous cheer erupted from the crowd. The people who had once been shackled by oppression now stood together in celebration, ready to walk into a future they could finally call their own. And at the center of it all stood ADANNA, the girl who had been forced into marriage but had found something far greater, her destiny. As the night stretched on, filled with music, dancing, and the warmth of community, ADANNA knew that this was only the beginning. There would still be challenges, still be obstacles, but she was no longer afraid. She had fought for her freedom, and now, she would fight for the freedom of all those who could not fight for themselves. A new dawn had risen, and ADANNA was ready to lead it. Thank you besties for watching till the end. What do you think of this story, and did it remind you of anyone? Please share in the comment section. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to Folktales by IJ, so we can keep bringing you inspiring African folktale stories on Folktales by IJ.